Dispatch calling Echo 5. Retrieve contents of Case 457 Whiskey. Do not watch the footage. Repeat. Do not watch the footage. All officers exposed resigned within hours. Subject last accessed at 0244. This is a transfer order only. Engagement not authorized. May God help whoever pressed play.
The precinct's south wing had always felt colder than the rest. It wasn't the faulty heating unit or the flickering overhead lights that gave officers pause. It was the air itself, thicker, heavier, like it remembered things that people were trying to forget. That night, every hallway beyond Sector D was empty. Phones rang unanswered, coffee cups sat cooling on desks, and computer monitors glowed with unread reports. Something had shifted in the atmosphere, subtle but unmistakable. In the evidence room, Lieutenant Marissa Hale keyed in her clearance. Code, expecting to do nothing more than routine storage for a box logged under non-critical. But when the door opened, the red blinking light above the terminal drew her eye like a wound. Case 457W. She froze. That case hadn't been touched in over a year, not since the last 3 detectives assigned to it submitted resignation letters. On the same night, citing personal emergencies they refused to explain, Marissa stepped inside cautiously, her boots quiet against the linoleum floor. The air smelled faintly of cold metal and something older, like burned film or wet stone. On the screen, a timestamp flickered. 02:44 a.m. Access granted. Someone had played the footage again, and no one had reported it. That wasn't just a breach. It was a violation of an unspoken rule. The kind of rule every cop learned without ever being told. Never look at what made grown men quit without explanation. Her breath shortened. She reached for her radio, but paused. A single USB drive rested on the desk, unlabeled except for a number etched in pen across the top. 7. The red light blinked once more, and then it turned off. Lieutenant Hale didn't touch the drive. Not immediately. Her instincts were sharpened by years of field work, and something about its silence screamed louder than a siren. She glanced at the security camera above her, still functioning. At least it looked like it was. Then again, surveillance had a habit of failing when it came to this case. She pulled out her notepad, scribbled the drive's serial number, and made a decision she would later wish she hadn't. She inserted it into the precinct terminal. Nothing happened at first, just a black screen, then flickering static. A date appeared, May 7th, 2022. The footage was labeled simply, Interview Room 4, Final. No subject name, no file notes, no authorization. Her finger hovered over the play button, and a chill ran down her spine. Unlike any fear she had felt while chasing suspects down alleys or standing at the edge of hostage negotiations. This fear wasn't logical. It wasn't even hers. It felt transferred, borrowed from someone who'd already seen what came next. Against her better judgment, she hit play. At first, there was only darkness. Then a face slowly came into view. Male, gaunt and looking directly into the camera. He didn't blink, didn't move, just stared. The room behind him was dead silent, but his mouth moved in slow, deliberate rhythm, as if he was speaking underwater or through time itself. No audio, no subtitles, just lips repeating a sentence over and over. She leaned closer, trying to read the pattern, and then suddenly, in a single distorted frame, the man's face shifted to her own. It lasted half a second, but it was enough to jolt her hand off the mouse. The footage froze. The lights flickered. And somewhere down the hall, every printer in the precinct started spitting out paper. The officers gathered around Hale's desk, drawn by the sound of printers vomiting. Dozens of blank sheets, except they weren't blank. Each page displayed the same image, a paused frame from the video, her face staring back from the interrogation room screen, but aged, twisted, as if decades of something unspeakable had passed in seconds. Some pages had timestamps, all identical. 3:17 a.m. Others had the words, "Do not watch again," scrawled in broken typeface, like a corrupted font had tried to scream. Officer Mullins, the youngest in the unit, grabbed one of the prints and turned pale. "Lieutenant," he said, voice trembling, "I've seen this man before." Hale shot him a look. "Which man?" "The one in the video." Before his face changed. Mullins swallowed hard. "I saw him outside my apartment 2 nights ago." Confusion turned to static in Hale's mind. She tried to rationalize. Maybe it was someone who looked similar, a glitch, a prank, but none of it held. She turned back to the terminal. The video had closed itself. No file remained. The drive ejected on its own. Hale picked it up, only now the label had changed. Where before there was a serial number, now it read 457W. That designation didn't exist in any active case file. She opened the precinct database to search, and for a moment it refused to respond. Then a single file blinked to life. 457W, Eyes That See Themselves. It had no author, no date, just a note in the body. Every officer who watches this must choose, erase the tape or erase their badge. Hale looked around. The room was silent again, but it wasn't empty. Everyone who had seen the footage that night would submit their resignation within the hour, and none would be able to explain why. By morning, the precinct resembled a forgotten chapel after a storm. Desks sat abandoned mid-task, drawers left open with badges tossed inside like fallen medals. Lieutenant Hale walked the empty hallway slowly, her footsteps echoing like confessions. Each door she passed was ajar, as if everyone had fled mid-thought, mid-breath. She passed Officer Mullins' locker, wide open, uniform still hanging, but his nameplate missing. The incident log from the night before was blank. Not incomplete, blank, like it had never been opened. Hale's eyes scanned the digital terminal. The entire server had reset itself. Case numbers, suspect lists, shift schedules, gone. All that remained was one folder titled 457W. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. Against her better judgment, Hale clicked it. Inside was a single video clip titled Entry 0. She hesitated, breath hitching as if her lungs were trying to hold her back, but curiosity overrode caution. The video opened to a black screen, then static, then a voice, hers. "My name is Lieutenant Hale. I am recording this to remember what's real." She blinked, confused. She had never recorded such a message. The video cut to surveillance footage of herself, sitting in her own office, talking to someone off camera. But the timestamp was impossible. Dated for the next night, tomorrow. She fast-forwarded. In the footage, her face changed, confusion to terror. She mouthed something, but no sound came through. Then her image flickered out, replaced by a screen, full of names, officers, all the ones who had resigned. Then it added one more name, live on screen, Letty Hale. She slammed the laptop shut. Her hands were trembling. She didn't know what was happening, but something had watched them watching, and it hadn't finished yet. Lieutenant Hale stumbled back from the desk, her heartbeat rising like a siren beneath her skin. The video's echo still seemed to cling to the room, as if it had altered the air itself. She pressed her palm to the frosted glass window of her office door, half expecting her reflection to look different. And for a second, it did. Just a second too long, her mirror image blinked out of sync. She backed away. Something was watching her, not from the hallway, but from within the station itself. She moved through the corridors with quiet urgency, finding only more signs of desertion. Uneaten lunches on desks, chairs still spinning, cups of coffee gone cold. On the main whiteboard, someone had scrawled in red marker, "Don't rewind, it rewinds you." Hale rubbed the words with her sleeve. They wouldn't erase. The ink felt like it had soaked into the glass, into the walls, into her own memory. She made her way to the archive room, seeking answers, but the keypad wouldn't respond. Instead, the display showed a countdown. 12 seconds. 11. 10. The lights flickered. She didn't wait. She turned to run, but the hallway had changed. No longer the clean, tiled corridor she knew. Now dim, pulsing with a low electrical hum, the same hallway seemed longer, as if stretched by time or by will. At the far end, a screen blinked to life. The same clip again. Her. Tomorrow. Screaming. She couldn't hear the words, but her future self was pointing at something. Something behind the camera. Hale turned around. Nothing. But the temperature dropped, breath clouding in front of her. The screen now flashed. 12 officers remaining. She hadn't said that aloud, but the system knew. And it was counting down. She rushed back into the bullpen, trying to shake the chill clinging to her spine, but the atmosphere had shifted again. This time not with fear, but with something closer to resignation. Sergeant Diaz was gone. His desk sat perfectly undisturbed, except for a single sticky note placed dead center on the keyboard. It read, in capital letters, "We saw ourselves. That was enough." Hale picked it up with trembling fingers. What had they seen that broke? Them? She needed answers. In the AV room, where the original tape had been reviewed, she found the projector still humming. But the footage wasn't of the hallway anymore. It was now showing live camera feeds of the precinct. Every room, every corridor, every remaining officer, including her. She watched herself walk into the AV room in real time, until the feed glitched. For a moment, there were two of her on screen. One continued watching. The other turned slowly toward the lens and smiled. Not a friendly smile, a knowing one, as if she'd already seen how this ended. Hale slammed the monitor off, heart pounding. The screen stayed black, but her reflection remained. It blinked. She didn't. The horror wasn't in what they'd watched, but in what had watched back. She now understood why the others resigned, vanished, or worse. The recording wasn't a recording anymore. It was evolving, reacting, predicting, and whatever it showed wasn't just imagery, it was prophecy or possession. She backed away slowly, careful not to make sudden moves. Behind her, the hallway lights began flickering in a rhythm, like Morse code. She didn't need to decode it. Her gut already knew. The case file wasn't meant to be opened. It had opened them instead. The station was no longer safe. Not from what was outside, but from what had awakened inside. Detective Hale didn't clock out. She just left her badge on the front desk and walked out into the night, phone turned off, pistol still holstered. Something had followed her, not in the physical sense, but in the way her thoughts no longer felt like her own. At 3:17 a.m., she found herself parked outside an abandoned warehouse on the city's edge, headlights cutting through the mist. Her fingers trembled on the steering wheel, though she didn't know why. She wasn't assigned to any case here. She hadn't been called, but something had pulled her there, like the precinct's presence still pulsed beneath her skin. As she stepped out, the cold hit differently, thick, sentient, as if the very air resented her presence. The warehouse door was unlocked, though rusted shut just hours ago according to official reports. Inside, rows of broken monitors lined the walls, playing the same black and white footage on loop. Officers watching screens, and disappearing, over and over. One monitor flickered and changed. It showed her, standing in the exact spot she stood now, but from behind. She turned. No one. When she looked back at the screen, the feed zoomed into her eyes. Not a digital effect, something deeper, more anatomical. It felt like the screen was dissecting her. Suddenly, static surged through the air like thunder. The warehouse lights blinked once, then died. But the footage remained, and her figure on the screen kept moving, even though she stood frozen in place. It turned away and walked deeper into the building, alone, without her. She realized she wasn't watching a video, she was watching what she hadn't done yet, or wouldn't remember doing. That's when the door slammed behind her, and a whisper crawled across the walls. "You opened it. Now it will open you." The warehouse was not what it seemed. Each step Hale took echoed twice, once in her ears and once deeper in her chest. Like her heartbeat had split in two. The floorboards creaked beneath her boots, but the shadows made no sound even when they moved. She passed a filing cabinet that hadn't been listed in any report, its drawers half open, filled with folders that bled ink as if they'd been crying. Every case number inside had been blacked out, save one, 457W. As she reached for the folder, it snapped shut, as if alive. A cold wind circled the room without source, and the monitor behind her flickered again. Now it showed 3 officers in the interrogation room, the original footage. But something was wrong. The timestamp kept reversing, ticking backward in jolts, then skipping forward violently. The officers argued, then froze. One stood up and pointed at the camera, mouthing something Hale couldn't hear. Suddenly, all 3 turned their heads in unison and stared directly at her through the screen. Her breath caught. The screen cracked, not shattered, cracked from within. The glass bled a single streak of dark liquid that trailed down like a tear. Behind her, the drawer creaked open again, revealing a second folder labeled Viewers. Inside, her name, her full name, her handwriting on a confession she never wrote. The date on the page was tomorrow. She stepped back, trembling, and noticed the old police crest on the far wall had morphed. The eagle had no eyes. The scales were tipped entirely to one side. Beneath it, a phrase burned into the paint. "Witnesses are contagious." Hale dropped the folder and turned to leave, but the hallway was gone. The door was gone. Only the screen remained, and now it was showing her again. Asleep. Hale reached for her radio, but all she got was static, until a voice cut through, whispering her own name, twice, like an echo from a mouth that no longer existed. The screen now displayed her entering the warehouse from moments ago, but the figure wasn't quite right. Her movements were off, too smooth, too deliberate, like watching herself from a dream. And then the second version of her looked straight at the camera and smiled. That was the first time she ran. Bolted down a corridor that hadn't been there before, lit by flickering ceiling lights that blinked in a code she couldn't understand. Each turn she took led to more footage. Screens on the walls showed old case files, missing persons, closed investigations, confessions given under duress. On each screen, she recognized someone, a fellow officer, an old teacher, a girl from a missing child report. All of them looked at her. All of them mouthed the same thing. "You saw it too." Panic surged. Her heart thudded loud enough she feared it might be caught by the mics. Then came the tape. One reel-to-reel recorder sat spinning without power. Its tape ran endlessly, looping footage from the night before. A recording of the officers in Case 457W, sitting around the table, whispering to someone not on camera. Each whisper seemed to ripple the walls around her, bending space like heat. And then she heard her own voice, clear, in the middle of their dialogue. "I shouldn't have watched it either," the voice said. "But it's too late now." Hale stumbled back, the air around her pulsing like it was breathing. She wasn't just reviewing the case anymore. She was becoming part of it. And the warehouse. It was learning her patterns. Detective Hale emerged from the warehouse just after 4 a.m., drenched in sweat, her pulse erratic, her eyes unfocused. The air outside was calm, but her senses were distorted, as if her body had stepped out while her mind remained inside. She didn't speak to the officers waiting by the perimeter. She couldn't. Every word felt like it might summon something. When she was taken to medical for evaluation, the nurse noted her skin temperature was 10 degrees lower than normal, and her pupils didn't react to light. But it was the silence that concerned them most. She just sat there, scribbling symbols on a pad they gave her, mumbling the phrase, "I saw it too," under her breath like a prayer or a countdown. Captain Rhodes ordered the footage retrieved from her body cam, but the feed was blank after the 3rd minute. Only one audio spike remained, a single whisper, "You're the last one now." That same night, Hale requested an off-record meeting with Internal Affairs. She brought no notes, no testimony, just a USB drive. The agent present, Special Investigator Dawn, later claimed what he saw on the file made no logical sense. Frames flickered between warehouse footage, surveillance tapes from the police department, childhood home videos, and something else, something like a face, but never fully forming. Dorn handed the drive over for analysis, but within hours, he submitted his resignation. By morning, 3 more officers had done the same. Not out of fear, but because they claimed they couldn't sleep without seeing the room. The phrase spread through the department like a virus. Nobody dared ask what room. They just nodded in shared dread. Hale, meanwhile, disappeared that night. Her badge, placed gently on her locker shelf, was the last sign she had ever been there. By the time the department tried to contain the panic, rumors had already outpaced reason. Officers began filing for leave without explanation, citing vague illnesses, insomnia, or feelings of being watched in their own thoughts. A quiet but unignorable shift settled in the precinct. Radios crackled with static at 2:17 a.m. every night. Surveillance monitors glitched at the exact same moment, regardless of the room or device. IT specialists found no malware, only overwritten logs and looping system timecodes, always returning to a timestamp labeled Case 457W, incomplete. The chief brought in external consultants, psychologists, tech analysts, even clergy. None lasted more than a day. One priest requested to burn the footage in the parking lot, then refused to speak after being escorted out. Another expert, a behavioral profiler named Eliza North, wrote only one sentence in her report before vanishing. "The recording watches you back." That sentence triggered a second wave of resignations. Files started to disappear. Printouts returned black. Security cards were demagnetized. Those who stayed swore they heard footsteps behind them in locked rooms. Others found fingerprints inside their lockers, some matching former officers, some matching no one in the system. The case file was eventually moved to a locked drawer in the chief's office, marked with red ink, "Do not access." But even then, one janitor claimed the drawer opened itself one night, and the file was missing by morning. There were no forced entries, no security logs, nothing. All that remained was the locker Hale once used, and a message scratched faintly into the back panel, visible only under infrared light. It read, "It chose me. Now it waits." From that moment on, no one entered that locker room after dark, and no one ever spoke her name again. Months passed, and silence took over. The case was marked inactive, not due to lack of evidence, but because no one dared review it again. The precinct underwent internal renovations, though no one admitted why. The hallway that led to Archive Room B was sealed off with steel plating, officially labeled as a structural hazard. Yet, night officers reported hearing typing behind the wall, always around the same hour, 2:17 a.m. A rookie once joked about reopening the hallway for a dare. By the next morning, he had submitted a resignation letter without speaking to anyone, eyes hollow, lips bitten raw. What remained of the department worked in quiet dread. The captain started assigning double shifts to officers just to keep the night from falling silent. No one wanted stillness. One time, an officer accidentally played back an old dispatch tape from Case 457W. What followed was a voice that didn't belong to any known officer repeating, "I see ya," still, in a slow, crawling tone. The tape melted in the player. Not glitched, melted. They stopped using tapes after that. Some began to wonder if the footage itself had become sentient, a digital parasite embedded in the precinct's very walls. But no one dared test the theory. Eventually, one officer took a risk. He entered the sealed hallway during the day, pried open a panel behind the filing cabinet, and crawled into the dust-choked dark. He never came back. His badge was later found sitting on the police chief's desk, cold to the touch, humming. Faintly, though the room was silent. No one asked how it got there. The precinct adopted a new rule. No one speaks about 457W, not in briefings, not in whispers, not even in dreams, because somehow, it always hears. Detective Samuel Reyes had heard the whispers long before he ever read the case file. As a transfer from another district, he'd thought the silence around 457W was just another superstition, something old-timers clung to like an unofficial ghost story. But when he found the file folder misfiled under his own name, sealed in a drawer he'd never opened, he froze. The name printed on the first page wasn't his, but the photo was. Same eyes, same scar, same slight tilt in the shoulder, and a handwritten date below it. Next week. Reyes felt his blood turn to frost. He tried to report it, tried to hand the file to the captain. But the moment the folder left his hands, the writing disappeared. Only blank pages remained. The captain laughed it off, tossed the folder in the shredder. That night, Reyes found it again, on his car seat, with new photos of him in places he'd never been. One, standing in front of the interrogation room, another, asleep at his desk, time-stamped for a time he remembered being out of town. He turned off his phone, cut power to his apartment. But the dreams came anyway. Always the same footage, always the same words whispered behind his eyelids. You watched it. It watched back. Reyes stopped showing up to work. He stopped calling his sister. His neighbors say they last saw him staring at a blank television. Screen at 2:17 a.m., eyes wide, lips whispering something soundless. When officers were sent to check on him, his apartment was empty. Only the folder remained. On his bed, open to the first page. This time, there was a single sentence scribbled in red. The footage doesn't end when you close your eyes. And then, silence. The footage was never officially logged into evidence. No chain of custody, no metadata. And yet, every officer who entered room B7, even briefly, claimed to have seen it. They spoke of a figure that stood perfectly still in the corner of the frame, motionless, even as the timestamp advanced. The lights in the footage flickered but never went out. The room was silent, yet every viewer swore they heard a voice. Low, wet, and too close. Some claimed the figure looked familiar. A partner, a sibling, themselves. One rookie officer, Harper, screamed so violently during her viewing that she tore off her own body cam mid-shift. She never returned to the precinct. Another senior detective locked himself in the evidence room and wrote 78 pages of fragmented words, all in reverse, and then vanished. The station's security system, once reliable, began to glitch. Cameras looped rooms that were unoccupied. Radios picked up static-laced conversations that were never spoken. A technician attempted to isolate the footage and destroy it, but ended up hospitalized, muttering about eyes behind the screen. The chief ordered room B7 sealed indefinitely. They claimed a gas leak, but staff knew better. The room remains padlocked. No one enters. Yet sometimes, late at night, the monitor outside the room turns itself on. Without input, without signal, just a static-filled loop of flickering light. No footage, no sound, but a shadow in the corner, always facing the camera, always waiting. The precinct no longer assigns rookies there. No one volunteers for night shift. And whenever the clock hits 2:17 a.m., every officer looks away, because they know what's coming. They don't talk about it. They just listen for the sound of something breathing behind the glass. No official record of Case 457W remains in the national database. The report was never filed. The badge numbers of those who witnessed the footage are now listed as inactive, though no terminations or transfers were documented. The officer who originally submitted the drive, Detective K. Morales, was last seen walking into room B7, holding a file labeled "Do Not Play." She didn't walk out. When they opened the door hours later, all they found was her badge placed neatly on the table, facing the camera. The chair she sat in was still warm. Her coffee was still steaming, and the footage, still playing, now frozen on a single frame. A close-up of her face, blurred, distorted, but eerily similar to hers. Since that night, no one has been able to turn off the monitor in B7. It powers back on seconds after being disconnected. Engineers tried cutting the electrical supply. The monitor glowed in complete darkness. The hallway outside the room was sealed with soundproof walls. Still, officers on nearby shifts report hearing whispers. Some say it's the footage itself. Others swear it's not in the room, but behind them. One final note was found weeks later, slipped under the chief's door. No handwriting, no fingerprints, just a typed line. "I saw myself watching me." The precinct operates today under a different case numbering system. But within old drawers and quiet corners, officers still whisper the same phrase, 457W. And when someone new asks what it means, they're told, "Don't ask questions you're not ready to live with the answers to." Because some truths don't want to be uncovered. Some footage isn't meant to be watched. In some cases, the ones no one dares to name, never really close. They wait, and they remember who pressed play.